Your Honor, I've been on this force for 14 years. I know a criminal when I see one. And this man right here, Deputy Earl Croft, pointed directly across the courtroom. He was running drugs through my county. Plain and simple. The prosecutor nodded. The jury leaned forward. The judge made a note. And the man at the defendant's table, hands folded in front of him, wearing a gray button-down shirt because he hadn't been allowed to change out of it since his arrest 38 hours ago, said absolutely nothing. He didn't argue, didn't shake his head, didn't show a single flicker of the rage that any innocent man would feel sitting in that chair listening to someone lie about him in a court of law. He just watched Deputy Earl Croft the way a scientist watches something under a microscope, taking notes, counting violations, waiting. Deputy Earl Croft thought he was destroying another nobody, another black man without resources, without connections, without anyone powerful enough to make a difference. Another easy conviction in a county that had made a very comfortable habit of easy convictions. He had absolutely no idea what was sitting at that defendant's table. And in exactly 47 minutes, every single person in that courtroom was going to find out. Have you ever watched someone lie about you so confidently, so completely, that the people around you started to believe it? Let me take you back to where this story really begins. Not in that courtroom, not on the night of the arrest, but 6 months earlier in a conference room in Washington, D.C., where a decision was made that would change everything. 6 months before the trial. Mill Haven, Georgia. Population 41,000. From a highway, it looks like every other mid-sized southern city. Strip malls. A courthouse with columns out front. Churches on every third corner. Youth baseball fields that get used hard on Saturday mornings. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked and assume that means something good about the community they've built. But numbers don't lie, even when people do. Over 4 years, the Mill Haven Police Department's narcotics unit had made 94 drug arrests. 94. That's a lot for a city of 41,000. And when you looked at those arrests by race, something strange happened to the numbers. 81 of those 94 arrests involved black men. 81 out of 94. In a city where black residents made up 28% of the population. 28% of the people. 86% of the drug arrests. 31 complaints have been filed with the department's Internal Affairs Office over those same 4 years. 31 people who drove to the station, sat across a desk, described what happened to them, and signed their names to official documents saying, something is wrong here. 31 complaints. 31 investigations. 31 times the department investigated itself. 31 times they found nothing. The FBI's Civil Rights Division had been tracking Mill Haven for 14 months. They had the complaint data. They had the arrest statistics. They had field reports from a regional coordinator who'd been quietly interviewing residents for the better part of a year. What they didn't have was documented proof of how it was actually happening. How a deputy managed to find drugs in cars that didn't have any drugs. How the paperwork always lined up. How the body cameras always seemed to have technical difficulties at exactly the right moments. To get that proof, they needed someone on the inside. Not watching from the outside. Inside. Living it. Experiencing it firsthand. They needed someone willing to be the person Mill Haven's narcotics unit targeted. Special Agent Damon Reeves raised his hand before the supervisor finished explaining the assignment. 38 years old, 11 years with the Bureau. Former Marine who had done 2 tours before joining the FBI and spending the next decade building a specialty in exactly this kind of work. Civil rights violations. Systemic police misconduct. The machinery of injustice that runs so smoothly for so long that the people operating it stop believing anyone will ever look underneath it. He'd worked 3 operations like this before. He knew what it cost. He raised his hand anyway. Someone has to be the one they stop, he told his supervisor. Might as well be someone who can make it count. In January, Damon Reeves moved to Mill Haven. He rented a 1-bedroom apartment on DeSoto Street, on the east side of the city, the side where the complaints came from. He drove a 7-year-old Ford Fusion, dark blue, nothing flashy, registered through a bureau cover ID to a name and address that would hold up to any database search a patrol officer might run. He got a job at a shipping warehouse on the west end of town. Night shifts, 3 days a week. Just enough to explain the income. Just enough to build a real routine. He learned the roads. There were 3 roads in Millhaven where the arrests clustered. He knew their names from the complaint files before he ever drove them. Brenner Avenue, Lockett Road, the stretch of Highway 9 that ran past the county line. He started driving them regularly, the same way the residents of DeSoto Street drove them. Going to work, coming home, stopping for gas, living an ordinary life in a city that had made ordinary life quietly dangerous for people who looked like him. He kept a recording device in the button of his jacket. Another one in the rearview mirror of the Ford, installed by bureau technicians the week before he moved. Audio and video, both motion activated, both uploading to a secure server in real time. Every stop, every conversation, every word spoken through a car window would be preserved automatically. He carried a small notebook in his back pocket. He wrote in it every night. Names, badge numbers, exact quotes, timestamps. The kind of documentation that doesn't depend on anyone's memory because it was written down while the ink was still wet. He was patient. He had been trained to be patient. And he knew, from the complaint files, from the statistics, from 11 years of understanding how these systems worked, that patience was the one thing the people operating this machinery were not expecting. The first stop came on a Wednesday night in February. Brenner Avenue, 9:47 p.m. Damon driving home from his warehouse shift. Speed limit 35. His speedometer sitting at 33. Hands at 10 and 2. Both taillights working. Registration valid. No outstanding warrants. Nothing. He saw the patrol car pull out from a side street before the lights came on. He pulled over slowly, turned on his hazards, kept his hands visible on the wheel. The deputy who approached was not Earl Croft. He was younger, maybe 28, with a nervous energy that showed itself in the way he kept his hand too close to his holster for a routine traffic stop. His name tag read Walsh. License and registration. No greeting. No reason given for the stop. Damon produced both, slowly, narrating every movement. My wallet is in my jacket pocket. I'm reaching for it now. Walsh studied the documents for a long time. Long enough that Damon could see him thinking, "Where are you coming from?" "Work. The Hartley shipping warehouse on Western." "What do you do there?" "Loading and inventory." Walsh walked back to his car, ran the plates, came back 3 minutes later and handed Damon's license and registration through the window without a word. "You're free to go." No explanation. No apology. No reason given for why he'd been stopped in the first place. Damon drove 2 blocks, pulled into a gas station parking lot, and wrote 4 pages of notes before the adrenaline finished moving through his system. Stop 1. Walsh, badge 2241. No stated reason. No search. Released. Duration, 7 minutes. Possible pretextual stop. Insufficient evidence for pattern yet. Continue. He continued. The second stop came 3 weeks later. Lockett Road, Earl Croft. And this one was different. Damon knew it from the moment Croft's patrol car appeared in his mirror. The way it followed for a full 2 minutes before the lights came on. The way Croft took his time walking up to the window, rolling his shoulders like a man who had already decided how this was going to end. Step out of the vehicle. No license request. No greeting. Straight to that. "May I ask why?" "Step out of the vehicle, sir." The "sir" landing like something he'd been told to include, but hadn't learned how to mean. Damon stepped out, moved slowly, kept his hands where they could be seen. Croft was 46, broad-shouldered, with the specific kind of confidence that comes not from competence, but from never having faced a consequence. He looked at Damon the way certain men look at things they've already categorized. "I'm smelling marijuana coming from your vehicle." There was no marijuana. There had never been marijuana anywhere near Damon Reeves in his entire adult life. He was a federal agent with a security clearance and an 11-year service record. The inside of that Ford Fusion smelled like fast food and drive-through coffee. "I don't use marijuana, officer. I know what I smell." Croft was already moving toward the passenger side of the car. "I'm going to need to search your vehicle." "I don't consent to a search." "You don't have to consent. I have probable cause." The phrase landed with the casual ease of something rehearsed. Probable cause. The smell of marijuana. 2 words and a lie, and suddenly the Fourth Amendment evaporated on the side of Lockett Road at 10:15 on a Tuesday night. Damon stood beside his car with his hands visible and watched Croft search it. Watch him go through the glove compartment, the center console, the back seat. Watch his partner, a younger officer named Gibbs, stand near the front of the car looking anywhere except directly at what was happening. Croft straightened up from the passenger side. Nothing here. And then Damon saw it. In the mirror of his door, angled just enough. Croft's hand moving to his jacket pocket, coming out with something small. Moving toward the car's back seat in the same motion, fluid, practiced, the kind of thing a man does when he's done it enough times that it no longer requires conscious thought. The bag appeared under the seat like it had always been there. Well, Croft said, holding it up, "What do we have here?" It wasn't a question. Damon said nothing. Felt the cold certainty of what was happening settle into his chest alongside something else. Not fear, not outrage, recognition. This is how they did it. This is what 22 of those 31 complaints have been describing and nobody had believed. This 2-second motion on the side of a dark road. This casual manufacturing of a crime out of nothing. He memorized every detail of Croft's face as the handcuffs went on. He had everything he needed. Now he just needed Croft to say it in court. 38 hours later. Millhaven Municipal Court. The hearing was scheduled as routine arraignment. The DA's office had assigned it to an assistant prosecutor named Theo Garland who had handled hundreds of cases like this. Possession with intent. Officer testimony. Quick plea. Next case. The public defender assigned to Damon was a woman named Angela Marsh. 29 years old. 2 years out of law school. 63 active cases on her docket. She had 11 minutes with her client before the hearing began. In those 11 minutes, Damon told her 3 things. First, he was innocent. Second, everything that happened on Lockett Road was recorded. Third, she needed to trust him, follow his lead, and make sure Croft took the stand. Angela looked at him across the small table in the holding room. She'd been a public defender long enough to know when clients were lying to her. This man was not lying to her. She didn't fully understand what was happening yet, but something in the quality of his stillness told her this was not an ordinary case. "Do you want to tell me who you really are?" she asked. After the hearing, Damon said, "Let him testify first." Angela Marsh walked into that courtroom not knowing she was about to participate in something she would tell her grandchildren about. Earl Croft took the stand like a man collecting a debt. The prosecutor walked him through it the same way Damon had known he would. 14 years on the force. Experienced narcotics officer. Trained to detect the signs of drug activity. Smell of marijuana confirmed. Vehicle searched under emergency exception. Controlled substance discovered. Defendant showed no surprise at the discovery, consistent with knowledge of its presence. Each statement smooth. Each one a lie. Each one delivered with the unhurried authority of a man who has never once stood in a courtroom and been told he was wrong. No further questions. Angela Marsh stood up. She was young. She was tired. She had 63 other cases. She approached the witness stand the way a person approaches something they're not sure is safe to touch. And then she began. "Officer Croft, you testified that you detected the odor of marijuana from the defendant's vehicle. Is that correct?" "That's correct." "Before you approached the driver's window?" "Yes." "From how far away?" Brief pause. "Maybe 15, 20 feet." 15 to 20 feet. "And this odor was strong enough to constitute probable cause for a warrantless search?" "In my professional judgment, yes." "In your professional judgment." Angela opened a folder. "Officer Croft, in the past 3 years, how many times have you conducted a warrantless vehicle search based on claimed marijuana odor?" He shifted slightly. "I'd have to check the records." "I have the records." "The answer is 37 times. In 3 years. Does that number surprise you?" "That's part of my job." "Of course." "And of those 37 searches, how many times was actual marijuana found in the vehicle?" The courtroom was very quiet. Croft looked at the prosecutor. Looked back at Angela. "Some searches don't result in marijuana specifically, officer, not other substances. Marijuana, the substance you claim to smell. How many times?" "I'd have to review." 3 times, Angela said, out of 37 searches claiming marijuana odor. 3 actual marijuana discoveries. That's an 8% success rate on your probable cause claim. She let that sit for a moment. But you found other substances in 22 of those searches. Isn't that right? We found controlled substances, yes. Substances that were not marijuana. Even though marijuana is what you claim to smell. Different substances can. I'd like to show the court something. She walked to the laptop on the defense table. Pressed a key. The screen mounted on the courtroom wall lit up. Croft saw what was on it before anyone else did, because he was looking at the wall. And for the first time since he'd taken the stand, something moved behind his eyes. Something that was not confidence. Something older and colder. It was dashcam footage. Not from a patrol car. From a Ford Fusion. The angle was the door mirror. Slightly elevated. Pointed at the rear passenger area of the vehicle. And on that footage, with a timestamp burned into the lower right corner in white numerals that were not ambiguous about what minute and what second this had occurred, Deputy Earl Croft's right hand moved from his jacket pocket to the space beneath the rear passenger seat. The bag appeared from his hand. Not from a seat. From his hand. The courtroom erupted. The prosecutor was on his feet. The judge was calling for order. 2 jurors were leaning forward with their mouths open. One woman in the gallery put her hand over hers. Croft gripped the arms of the witness chair. That footage has been tampered with, he said. His voice had lost something. The certainty was still there, but it had gone brittle, the way ice sounds right before it cracks. That is not what happened. Officer Croft, Angela said, and her voice was steadier than it had any right to be. I'm going to show you a second piece of footage. This one is from a recording device concealed in the defendant's jacket button. Same timestamp, different angle. She pressed the key again. The audio came through the courtroom speakers first. Croft's voice. Clear. Unmistakable. Well, what do we have here? And then the visual. Croft's face. The bag in his raised hand. And behind him, visible at the edge of frame, his partner Gibbs turning away. Not watching. Looking deliberately at the sky. The courtroom was not erupting anymore. It had gone the other direction entirely. The specific silence that falls when a room full of people realizes simultaneously that something is very different from what they thought it was. The prosecutor sat down. Croft looked from the screen to Angela Marsh, to the prosecutor, to the judge, and then, finally, to the man at the defendant's table. Damon Reeves was watching him. The same way he'd watched him on Lockett Road. The same way he'd watched him from the back of the patrol car. Completely, unnervingly still. Officer Croft, Angela said, her voice cutting through the silence like something surgical. I have one more thing to enter into the record. She walked to the bench and placed a sealed document in front of Judge Marion Ellis. The judge broke the seal. Read the contents. Her expression, which had been professionally composed through the footage and the audio and the collapse of Earl Croft's testimony, changed. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just the slight shift that crosses a person's face when something rearranges itself. She looked at the man at the defendant's table. Counsel, Judge Ellis said. Approach. Both attorneys walked to the bench. The prosecutor read over the judge's shoulder. He went pale in stages, color leaving his face from the top down, like something draining. Angela returned to the floor. Officer Croft, she said, the man you arrested on Lockett Road, the man you are currently lying about in this courtroom, the man you planted evidence on, then followed through his arrest, processing, and arraignment, believing he was just another person without the power to fight back. She paused. His name is Special Agent Damon Reeves. He is a 14-year veteran of the United States Army and an 11-year veteran of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. He has been embedded in Millhaven for 6 months, conducting a federal investigation. Into you, Officer Croft. Into your partner Gibbs. Into the systematic pattern of evidence, planting, and false arrest that your unit has been running against the residents of this city for the past 4 years. She let that land. Every stop, every conversation, every planted bag, and every lie you've told in the courtroom has been documented, recorded, and submitted to the United States Attorney's Office. A federal grand jury has been convened, and as of 40 minutes ago, federal arrest warrants have been issued. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. For people walked in. Dark suits. Federal credentials displayed. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. Croft watched them come down the aisle. His hands, which had been gripping the arms of the witness chair, slowly released. 14 years of a badge. 14 years of a system that had never once told him no. 14 years of walking into courtrooms like this one and saying whatever he needed to say because nobody in the chair across from him had ever been able to prove otherwise. And now he was sitting in that chair, and the man who had been in it was standing by the defense table watching him with 11 years of federal service and 6 months of documented evidence and the calm, absolute patience of someone who had known since the night of the arrest exactly how this moment was going to look. Earl Croft was taken into custody in the courtroom. His partner Gibbs, who had turned away on Lockett Road rather than watch, was arrested at the precinct 2 hours later. He had been trying to delete records from a department server when the agents walked in. The deletion attempt was itself logged. It became evidence. The Millhaven Police Department's narcotics unit was suspended pending federal review that same afternoon. The DA's office, which had prosecuted 22 of those 94 drug cases, announced an immediate internal review. Prosecutor Theo Garland, who had handled 7 of them personally, hired a private attorney before the sun went down. Captain Renard Walsh, no relation to the young officer on Brenner Avenue, who had signed off on the dismissed complaints and supervised the narcotics unit for 6 of the 4 years under investigation, was placed on administrative leave while federal investigators reviewed what he knew and when he knew it. Internal Affairs, which had investigated itself 31 times and found nothing 31 times, was dissolved. Federal oversight was established in its place, and a federal judge ordered a review of every conviction that had relied on Earl Croft's testimony. There were 38 of them. 6 months later, the results of that review were announced on a Tuesday morning in the Millhaven courthouse. Not the same courtroom, a bigger one because there were too many people to fit in the regular room. Families, defendants, former defendants, people who had spent months and years in county jail on charges that had been manufactured the same way Damon's had been, with a 2-second motion and a practice lie and a system that had protected both for so long it had stopped questioning them. 26 convictions vacated, thrown out, void. 14 people released from custody, some of whom had been incarcerated for years. One man, Calvin Reese, had served 3 years and 4 months. His daughter had been 7 when he went in. She was 10 when he walked out of the county facility into the parking lot where his mother was waiting. She didn't recognize him at first. Then she did. Calvin's mother told a reporter later that when her son saw his daughter, he dropped to his knees in the parking lot and couldn't stand back up for a while. He just stayed there. His daughter had her arms around his neck. Neither of them said anything. I told them, Calvin's mother said. When it happened, I went to that station and I filled out the form and I told them what Earl Croft did to my son. They said there was no evidence. They said the officer's account was credible. She looked directly at the camera. Credible. That's the word they used. She paused. Somebody finally believed us. It took a federal agent getting arrested for somebody to finally believe us. Damon Reeves sat in his supervisor's office in Atlanta 3 weeks after the trial and gave his debriefing for 6 hours straight. Every stop, every conversation, every note from the brown leather journal, the timestamps, the badge numbers, the exact words, written down the same night they were spoken so they couldn't be misremembered or disputed later. His supervisor, special agent in charge Helena Park, listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. You could have identified yourself, she said. At any point. The first stop. The second stop. Certainly when Croft put the bag in your car. 1 sentence, and it would have been over. Damon looked at the window. Over for me. Yes, but not for Calvin Reese. Not for the 25 others. Not for the next person Croft stopped after I walked away. He looked back at her. If I surface the moment he touches me, he apologizes, the department conducts an internal review, they find nothing wrong, and in 6 months he's back on Lockett Road, doing exactly what he always did. Because the system was built to protect him, and it was very good at its job. He folded his hands on the desk. I needed him to do it to a federal agent so completely, so confidently, that he walked into a courtroom and lied about it under oath. I needed the system to try to convict me, because if it tried to convict me and failed, it had to explain why it succeeded on 26 other people who told the exact same story. Helena nodded slowly. "The 26, she said. "Is that why you took this assignment?" Damon thought about the complaint files. 31 of them. The names and the dates and the stories that were almost identical. The stamped word, unfounded. 31 times. Someone had to be the one they stopped, he said. Might as well be someone who could do something about it. Earl Croft's federal trial lasted 6 days. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 40 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Civil rights violations, evidence tampering, perjury, conspiracy. The combined sentencing exposure ran to 18 years. His attorney negotiated. The final sentence was 11 years federal, no early release. His partner Gibbs received 7 years for conspiracy and obstruction, reduced slightly for cooperation. Captain Walsh, who had signed off on 31 complaints without investigating any of them, was charged separately with obstruction of justice and abuse of authority. He pled guilty to avoid trial and received 4 years. On the day Croft was sentenced, Damon Reeves sat in the back of the courtroom the way Ira Spencer had sat in the back of hers. Quietly, not celebrating, just watching. When the judge read the sentence, Croft turned and looked at the gallery, maybe looking for someone who still believed him, maybe looking for the support he'd always had. His brother who ran a car dealership, his union rep, the guys he'd worked with for 14 years who had watched what he did and looked the other direction. Most of them weren't there, the ones who were looked at their phones. Croft's eyes found Damon in the back row. Damon met his gaze for a moment. Then he looked back at the judge. He had somewhere to be. 1 year later, the Millhaven Police Department operates under a federal consent decree. Every patrol officer wears a body camera that uploads to an independent server every 2 hours. The footage cannot be deleted by anyone within the department. It requires a federal court order to suppress. A civilian oversight board reviews every complaint. Not one person, not a nephew. An actual board with actual authority to compel testimony and recommend termination. Traffic stop data is published quarterly on the city's website, broken down by race, by outcome, by officer, every number visible to everyone. In the first year under the new system, the narcotics unit made 31 arrests. Of those 31, 19 resulted in actual convictions on actual evidence. The unit's commander publicly described this as a recalibration toward quality over quantity. The complaint dismissal rate dropped from 100% to 12%. On DeSoto Street, where Damon Reeves had lived for 6 months in a 1-bedroom apartment with a cover identity and a recording device and a brown leather journal, a woman named Patricia Okafor is raising her 2 sons. Her oldest, Marcus, is 14. He plays basketball 3 nights a week at the rec center on Brenner Avenue. Patricia drives him home after practice. She drives down Lockett Road sometimes. The same road. She told a reporter she used to grip the wheel harder when she saw patrol cars on that road. The specific kind of dread that becomes so ordinary you stop noticing it until the day it's gone. It's different now, she said. Not perfect. I'm not naive, but different. I could drive my son home without counting badge numbers. She paused. I didn't know anything about the investigation when it was happening. I didn't know there was an agent living 2 streets over, driving that road the same way I drove it. I didn't know someone was watching and writing it down. She looked at her hands. I think about that. Somebody doing that. Going through all of that so that the people on my street could drive home without being afraid. She shook her head slowly. That's something. That's really something. Damon Reeves received a commendation from the FBI director 6 months after the trial. A formal ceremony. A handshake. Words on a framed document about extraordinary service and commitment to equal justice. He thanked the director, shook the hands, posed for the photograph, and then he went back to his desk and opened a new file. A different city, a different set of numbers that didn't add up, a different pattern of complaints that all told the same story and had all been told to go away. He read through the file the way he always read through files. Carefully, completely, writing in the margins. On the last page of his notes, the way he always did at the start of an operation, he wrote 2 words. Be patient. He closed the notebook. He had work to do. Justice doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always wear a uniform you can see or carry credentials you can read. Sometimes it sits in a folding chair in a 1-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of the city, driving the same roads every day, waiting for the people who believe they're untouchable to prove it one more time. And when they do, it's watching. Every word, every motion, every lie told, and every truth buried. It's writing it all down, and it's patient enough to wait until the right moment. The moment when patience stops being a strategy and becomes something else entirely. Proof. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to PAP Stories for more powerful narratives about justice, accountability, and the people who fight for both. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Your voice matters. Documentation matters. Justice matters. Don't stay silent.